Just answering a question with WAPTEC. It's not really a question. This person was literally just asking questions and making assertions, and I delayed this one for a very simple reason I'll give you in the end of the video. Here we go. WAPTEC, you say that in the case of the moon landing, I am very sure it was actually real. Someone asked me my opinion. I don't have to give any proof. It's just my conclusion. That's like waving a red flag in front of a troll on the internet. I prefer chocolate over vanilla. Someone will try to prove vanilla is poisonous and chocolate is poisonous and vanilla cures cancer, and Jews did chocolate or something like that. But anyway, here we go. Assertion. There's no reliable evidence that man ever went to the moon, and there's absolutely would be plenty of the moon landings were real. This is just the same statement. You're saying there's no evidence. Counterpoint. You already know what's going to be said here. That's why you said this in this sequence, but I'll play along. There isn't any evidence that says that we didn't land on the moon. People look at, if you have an overwhelming amount of evidence that it's daylight outside right now, and you want to make the assertion it's not daylight, but there's no evidence for it, you just simply say there's no evidence it's daylight. Prove me wrong. That's the tactic. It's Troll 101. You have to prove to me you're a military person by showing me all of your records and personally identifiable data. The answer, of course, to that is no, I'm not going to give you my identity data so you can steal it. I'm not in the military, but other military people have explained to people that I'm not going to give you my social security number. Well, then you can't prove your person. It's like, come on. Next. And then, of course, the person is expecting me to bring it up, but let's just read along because this person is already setting traps and then triggering them. Triggered. That reflector on the moon is not reliable evidence. The Russians claim that they have a reflector on the moon as well via an unmanned probe. But is it on the moon or not? See, the sneaky thing here is it's not reliable. How is it not reliable? That it's there or not? Anybody can point a laser at the moon under certain conditions. You need to understand what you're doing here and be able to get that bounce back. It's called the moon bounce experiment. You can do this now. Anybody can get a laser, but at one time it was pretty hard to do. So let's get on with the rest of the statements. As for the Russian unmanned probe leaving it, that's great. But the point was that we weren't sending probes. We wanted to one-up the Russians. Isn't that your claim? This was a pissing contest? So anyway, how does one confirm that this reflector is actually there anyway? You mean the ones the Russians say they put there? So there aren't any reflectors on the moon. Okay. Well, you already know the experiment is you fire a laser at it and you get the bounce back, and you fire a sequence of pulses that are unique. Like, type out the alphabet. That'll work pretty good as a burst. Type out all 8 bits of each letter of the alphabet in sequence and put a space between them and do it. You can also do a Morse code style pulse pattern. And you measure the delay time as it bounces back, and you can do a pretty precise number for it. That's all you got to do. And you know that. That's why you ask this. Because you know if you ask certain questions, I'll say certain things. You might have been trying to get me to spell out some word by, let's see what subjects he covered. It's a drinking game. Okay, next. Do we take their word for it? No, you test this. You don't trust NASA. But I know for a fact that you won't do this experiment, because then you'd have to definitively say a fact. I did an experiment and this is the result. You can deny what caused it, but you're not going to do the experiment. The 1 or 2 moon landing denialists that do the experiment always claim that it's somebody messing with them from low Earth orbit. It doesn't matter if you can do this hundreds of miles apart, which would make it to where you can determine if it's low Earth orbit. They won't test their assertions, because I don't know if anybody's gotten this, but the most likely thing when you see someone posting moon landing denial stuff this way is they don't really think that the moon landing was faked. Continue. In the case of the greatest scientific achievement in human history, that's not the greatest scientific achievement in human history. The moon landing. Every form of verifiable evidence that could be produced by NASA would have been produced by NASA. And of course, the response I'm going to give you is they've released all of the evidence over time, and they released most of it immediately. They haven't been hiding anything, and they only just, You can look it up. They released all the bad photos too. You can still use them because we can take those photo images. You can get raw images in TIF format or whatever. You can confirm that these photos are not faked. You knew that, right? Of course you did. There's a mountain. It's not a mountain of evidence. NASA has not attempted to hide anything. Period. Full stop. Even their screw-ups. You can even look up all the dumb things that happened during that time and lots of bad mistakes. Now, what about the Russians? How many times did they try to land that reflector on the moon? How many times did they fail? I mean, I'm going to look it up. I can't off the top of my head remember whether I checked on that. How many times did they fail to launch a vehicle into space and not tell anyone? Which country is notorious for covering up failures? How many times did they try to land on the moon and fail? Remember, they're based on secrecy. They're based on lying about whether their missiles worked at one time. I mean, literally, the Russian government is notorious for lying about killing off their own cosmonauts. You don't think the Russians tried to land on the moon? Really? Which is more plausible? The Russians wanting to land on the moon because they were the first ones in space and also put the first woman in space and the first animal in space. They wouldn't try to land on the moon. And what happens if, as you may have noticed, they might have failed? One of the experiments they did, they assumed that just wearing warm clothes under a pressure suit would work. No, you have to have a thermal layer that reflects heat. Space blankets, that's why we use them. That's why they're called space blankets. They made stupid mistakes just like we did. And occasionally we'd share information back and forth, but a lot of the information that the Russians actually did share, because they did share it later, they wouldn't tell us what the hell went wrong for them to learn that. You can watch videos. You can see photos of people who died in an oxygen fire to find out you don't make a pure oxygen atmosphere on a spacecraft. The Russians cover up their mistakes. How many attempted landings failed? Do you really think that they wouldn't lie? Only Americans lie. You're a pathetic moron. Why don't you look up the failed attempts to land on the moon of other countries? China might have done it. It was to establish a moon base. You know that, right? The whole idea was to say, we could put a moon base up here by landing 6 times. We planted an American flag on a freaking ball of rock in space. That's not just a symbol. No, there isn't any Nazi moon base, because some people believe that as well. Well, there's a Nazi moon base, but the Americans didn't land there. It's occupied by Nazis, but not Americans. The Russians failed to land on the moon. And they lied. That's much more plausible. They found out that they couldn't do it. It's very difficult. Once you figure out how to do it, it's a bit easier. Why didn't we go back? I'll get to that. Here we go. You don't simply forget to produce clear color photos of the moon, of the Earth from the moon. Do you know how to make a vacuum chamber-proof camera? Do you understand that a vacuum chamber on Earth is about the same as the vacuum of space? Well, it's different by a billion to 1. Yeah, it's still 0. Yeah, a billion times 0 is still 0. Fuck. Anyway, here we go. Why didn't you take photos of the stars from the moon? There are 5 or 6 photos that have been found to accidentally have caught the stars. It's very difficult to get starlight. When you're pointing the camera anywhere near the moon, it'll auto-compensate. The film and cameras were set so that they didn't have to be dinked with too much. But I like to point out all the people with modern cell phones who couldn't get a muzzle flash from any source, but they got plenty of blinkies from frickin' helicopters. Yeah, contrast ratio is the thing. Be sure to scream in my face about that. There are now an ass ton of Las Vegas conspiracy theorists who've learned that the star argument for the moon landing is bullcrap. Now you have a problem with them having to reconcile that, well, it only works that way in space. Here's another one. When we landed on the moon, did we land on it when it was daylight for the moon? Because it's a long day on the moon, like weeks. Did we land on the moon when it was lit up, or did we land on it when it was dark? Which would you do? Take a pilot, take him out, just get a helicopter pilot, go out in the middle of the desert, tell him to land in the middle of the night, land without killing himself, make sure you don't have to pay extra, then have him go up 20,000 feet, point a freaking camera down, get the Hasselblad camera, point it straight down, and you get out a freaking flashlight and say, I want the mothership back, and see if you can see jack shit. Now do it during daylight. The only way you're going to do it is if you use a reflector during daylight. Okay, you're 1,000 feet away. Okay, now put yourself 300,000 miles or 100,000 miles away. Okay, let's just do that. Let's do that. Let's get as far away as possible. Can you see the reflected light? Okay, now you're on the moon. It's lit up by the hard beating sun, brighter than anywhere on the moon, on the Earth, excuse me. And you're reflecting light, and we're supposed to see that blinky. You don't get blinky. Here are a few quotes that deal with the subjects of evidence, logical inference, and evidence that you may find interesting. I'm only going to read the first one. The rest of them are all by Aristotle and various other people. Philosophy doesn't get you off the ground, and theories and hypotheses don't mean a damn thing without a decent experiment. All of you stick your head in the philosophical argument and what ought to be, but you don't actually go out and point a stinking laser at the moon, which is not illegal, and you can do it. Oh, the government will catch me for it. You're a lying shit, and you know you can do this experiment, and you're consciously avoiding doing it. Little kids in grade school do this experiment now. You can't do it. And you can't do it from 2 points 100 miles across away from each other without telling anybody you're doing it to see whether or not it's a low Earth orbit reflector or the firmament. That'll be the next argument, right? Again, did we land during moon's daylight or nighttime? Which would be easier to see from? So here we go. Why didn't the astronauts make some visible sign from the moon? Because it doesn't work. It would have been relatively easy to touch off some hyperchloric chemicals. They needed those to get back. Beam a laser to a mirror on Earth, but you can do the other way around and it works, but we don't believe that now. And no, a laser wouldn't be visible during daylight at that point. I mean, you could detect it if you did it as pulses above the noise level of every bit of brightness. On the Earth, we have this thing called the atmosphere. It tends to make this hard to do. Again, did they land when it was dark on the moon or bright? Which would you rather do? Get a pilot's license, learn how to fly a helicopter, do a night landing, prove to me you can do this consistently, and you wouldn't charge extra for it. Say it with a straight frickin' face, you jackass. Create a pattern with lightweight black dust. Albedo much? Or is it libido much? Provide some other means of definitively proving they were there. This was done in 1974, someone said this, along with some more things I'm going to read. So, later on, when a probe went around the moon and was able to photograph the landing site, that's not visible proof. Well, it has to be visible from the Earth. Okay, so we're supposed to etch a billboard into a freaking moon. What's the largest visible object on Earth? No, you cannot see the Great Wall of China from the moon. You can't. Shut up. Relying on an easily simulated picture on TV was the least reliable means of proof. And none of you today can prove this by faking a moon landing. First assumption I made. This is the thing. You say it's easy to do and you won't do it. One asshole, yes, he's an asshole, wants me to give him money to do it. He's going to do a GoFundMe. I'm going to rely on a conspiracy theorist to disprove his own theory. When you guys won't even do a simple experiment with a laser or just a camera at night or daytime. We never went to the moon. 1974, Bill Casing. He was wrong. That's it. I'm not going to cover the rest of these. There's Aristotle and a bunch of other people being quoted. That's fine. Philosophical arguments and what ought to be is great, but what actually works, works. Until you actually do something, you don't know whether it works or not. And I guarantee you the Russians found out they didn't have the ability to do it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. Bye.